It's Thursday, June 25th, 2020. 2 Corinthians 8:9 says, "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich." We've been working our way through the truths that have been suggested by our theme verse these past few weeks. So far, we've covered 6. In order for us to be rich, he had to become poor. In order for us to have life, he had to die. In order for us to be forgiven, he had to be punished. In order for us to be accepted, he had to be rejected. In order for us to become wise, he had to play the fool. And in order for us to become significant, he had to become nothing. And today we'd like to add a 7th. In order for us to become strong, he had to become weak. Several years ago, our family was living on Mammoth Road in Dracut, Massachusetts. Mammoth Road was part of the Underground Railroad and boasted the tradition of being one of the trails that runaway slaves were able to follow to freedom. The house that we were living in was very old, and while it had been renovated upstairs, the basement was still a very creepy place, with wooden stairs leading from our apartment down to stone walls and a cement floor. There was also an access to the basement through a bulkhead cellar door. The door was in the back of the house where it could not be observed from the road, and the thought of people sneaking in there under cover of darkness during the slave trade fired the imagination. The long and short of it was, the basement seemed like a place that might just be haunted. The door to the basement from upstairs was a rickety old solid wood door with an insufficient sliding lock that kept it closed. The door was in the hallway between the kitchen and the bedroom that I shared with my wife. One night, just after midnight, there was a terrible, frenzied pounding on the door to the basement. The pounding came from the basement side, and since that door was the only entrance besides the back bulkhead entrance, it was clear that whoever was there pounding on the door had to have come in from that bulkhead in the back of the house. Pounding lasted for only a few seconds, but I was on my feet in the semi-darkness in an instant as I tried to reassure my wild-eyed wife that I would find out who that was down there. I'm convinced even today that she was more confident of my courage and ability to deal with the situation than I was. I grabbed a baseball bat that was in the bedroom closet and threw on a pair of shorts so as not to confront the intruder in my jammies. I turned on the far too inadequate light at the top of the stairs and called out to whoever was down there, asking them to identify themselves. There was no answer, so I told my wife to lock the door behind me as I slowly made my way down the wooden steps. Bat in hand, I turned the corner at the bottom of the steps and began looking for the pull chain that would turn on the light in the back half of the basement. I still saw no one, so I looked behind the ancient furnace in the back of the basement and once again found no one. I stood stock still and listened for any breathing or anything else that would indicate the presence of an intruder. Again, nothing. So I made my way tentatively to the bulkhead door itself and found the bulkhead closed and the door that it led to still locked from the inside. I continued to look in nooks and crannies in that old basement for about 15 minutes and finally made my way back upstairs. I tapped on the door and asked Faith to let me back in, and when she did, I asked her if it was possible that I had just dreamed or imagined the pounding on the door. She assured me that she had heard it too, and that it had been loud enough to waken her from a sound sleep. There really wasn't anything else we could do, so we relocked the door and tried to go back to sleep. I was sound asleep at about 3 a.m. when, and I'm not making this up, someone or something at the end of the bed grabbed me by the feet. I literally stood up on the bed and was ready to pounce on whatever it was that had grabbed me and woken me from a sound sleep. My raging eyes met the fear-filled eyes of my wife. She quickly explained to me that she had needed to use the bathroom, and not wanting to wake me, she had opted not to turn on the light, and was just then making her way back to bed in the near darkness by feeling along the end of the bed, and that was how she had managed to grab my feet and wake me up. I politely asked her never to do that again, and we went back to sleep. I told you that story because I can't remember any other time in my life when I've wanted to resolve an issue in my life more than I wanted to resolve the issue of the ghost that had pounded on our door. I can't remember a time in my life when I've wanted answers more than I wanted them that night. In other words, I don't ever remember being so motivated to deal with an issue in my life as I was that night. See, there was something in my life that should not have been there. I didn't believe in ghosts, but here was this pressing evidence that they existed. And I wanted to deal with this pressing issue before another moment went by. Maybe you felt that way about some of the issues in your life. Maybe you've never been confronted by a ghost, but it's likely that there are attitudes, thoughts, and beliefs that have snuck into your life in the same way that there are attitudes, thoughts, and beliefs that have snuck into my life. In the same way that ghost snuck in that night so long ago. Oh, this is where I probably should tell you that we found the ghost about 3 days later when we were cooking supper. I needed some potatoes for the meal, so I went to the basement door and opened it, expecting to find the 10-pound bag that was hanging on the hook on the back of the basement door. But the potatoes weren't there. In fact, they were nowhere to be seen. I carefully walked down the wooden stairs and looked underneath them, and that's when I saw that the 10-pound bag of potatoes had broken open, and the potatoes had individually rolled and bounced down the steep wooden steps and hidden themselves under the steps, apparently at just after midnight 2 nights before. So my most pressing problem had been met with the most definitive solution in a very short time. But that's not how pressing problems usually work with me. We tend to watch 1-hour dramas on television and see that a problem comes up, causes hassles, and is resolved all in the space of 1 hour minus commercials. But in my real world, pressing problems usually come uninvited and stay longer than I want them to stay. And I wonder if the same thing happens to you. These problems show up and announce themselves, and we want an easy microwave solution that'll solve the problem and get us back on track. We want to find the torn bag of potatoes at the bottom of the stairs. We know that our problems and issues are robbing us of what could be, and we hate it. Coupled with that, most of us experience the pangs of conscience. You know, that nagging feeling that we could be doing better in certain areas of our lives. Of course, not everyone experiences those pangs of conscience because some people don't take into account how their personal issues impact the lives of those who are closest to them. I talk with people all the time who tell me that they have made foolish choices. They agree with that, but their foolish choices are really only impacting them, or so they say. It's as though they don't understand what Solomon said about the people who are close to them when they make those choices, those foolish choices. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." I'm not the only one who's hurt when I make a foolish choice. The people who love me are hurt right along with me. Our time is almost up, so I'd like to suggest once again that you spend some time in prayer. We've been talking about the 7th principle. In order for us to be strong, he had to become weak. When we're done with this 7th principle, we'll begin to talk about how the grace of God makes us strong. We'll talk about how God strengthens us to tackle the pressing issues in our lives that turn us inside out and crush and destroy not only us, but the lives of those around us. So as you take some time in prayer today, ask God to enlighten you about those issues in your life that are hurting you and those around you. Ask him to show you the things that he'll be strengthening you to face in the days that lie ahead. Let's talk again tomorrow.